Meeting to order. If we'd please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone. Let the roll reflect that Councilmember Leifeld is absent. We do have a quorum. Council members, are there any corrections to the minutes from the regular meeting of July 5th? Okay, and comments from the audience. At this time, if there is anyone that would like to wish to speak to the council, you may step forward, state your name, address. If there's anyone on Zoom that would like to speak to the council at this time, again, use the raised hand feature and we will bringing you into the meeting. And welcome.
Good evening, Your Honor, and distinguished council people. My name is Peter Lex. I'm the president of the East Hastings Improvement Association.
Yep.
It's working, Mary.
Thank
Your Honor,
you.
Mary, it's working. We'd like to commend Chris Jenkins for, we've had a meeting, I've had meetings with him concerning the park, the renovation of the East Side Park. And the residents, we've had numerous meetings over the years, and it's one thing we learned. I just told Mr. Hines when I came in, I said, the people below the tracks at Cowtowners believe in the word patience because we've been on this program for 3 years, but we're a very proud people, so we didn't want to make any waves. We just we want smooth sailing from this point forward. And at last week's meeting of the people from Cowtown, in getting the redraw, I went and I met with Chris at his office. We talked about what the people down there want, what the residents wanted, okay? And he brought that back, and then I would tell you that we are in 98, almost 99% of agreement with what the city. The thing is, we took out, when you look at the plan, the East Siders, we didn't want the path going along the lake, by eliminating that path, and we didn't have to put benches or pads in for benches, and we extended the sidewalk from where it ends on the east side all the way down to the Warman House, so it's ADA approved. The only question we have is, because if we saved you that blacktop path, which was almost 3/4 of a block long, we're thinking that maybe we could revise the plan just one more time, a little bit more, and we'll go from a half court to a full court basketball court. Other than that, we're in agreement, okay? Thank you for your time.
Anyone else wish to speak to the council at this time? And no one on Zoom. Okay, council members, are there any council items to be considered? And council, I would accept a motion to approve the consent agenda. Councilmember Brox? Councilmember Lund, second. Discussion, council? Okay, all those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. For this item, we will have an introduction by the City Administrator Dan Waticha, and it is about the Lake Isabel Park Budget Amendment and Award Contract. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Let me figure out, usually I'm at the dais, so a little puzzling with using a mouse here. As Mr. Likes indicated, Lake Isabel Park has been in various degrees of discussion for a couple of years. As you may recall, see if I can even get the dates right. In 2020, in 2020, we budgeted a little over $200,000 in 21 for the park. We also submitted to the Department of Natural Resources for a grant which was expected to pay 50% of it. It was capped at eligibility at $250,000 based off of the cost estimates at the time the DNR approved $240,000. But what we ran into is when the project was put to bid, it came in with a construction estimate about $140,000 higher than what we were anticipating, so about $640,000 instead of that $500,000 figure. We went back to ISG, the consultant that we had worked with on designing the redevelopment of the park. They had facilitated a number of neighborhood meetings for input on what sort of improvements would be beneficial to the neighborhood. They also familiar with the DNR process, knew what sort of improvements would be competitive in the DNR's view with the grant applications. Made some minor modifications to the plan, got those modifications approved by the DNR, which is important because we had their grant dollars approved. Put it back out to bid in June this year. Unfortunately, the numbers came back better, but still over budget. So what we're at tonight is a package of three things. One, say the price isn't going to get better by continuing to go back and tweak it. There might be some minor modifications that could have some improvements, but essentially this is about as good as the pricing is going to get. The other part to recognize is the approved DNR grant has a time limit of June 30th next year. So if we continue trying to go back and get better pricing, we have the risk at losing those grant dollars. So really the recommendation is let's go forward with the project. Let's accept the design of the project, award the contract that was bid by, I'm forgetting the name of the company, Minnesota Dirt Works, and essentially two budget amendments. One, carrying forward that $225,000 from the 21 to the 22 budget, and then also an additional $172,000 and change up and above beyond that. $100,000, a little over $100,000 for the increased bids in the cost, a little over $50,000 as a 10% contingency. Until you get into the project, you don't know what you're running into. And I think it was about $12,000 rounding out the project management and design work with ISG, bidding it and going back, rebidding it, had some cost overruns. So it's an expensive project. It's more than we were anticipating when we went into the DNR grant application a year and a half ago, or more than we were expecting when bidding it, but still a good project. We'll, on a side note, mention in conversations with the neighbors in this area, they've asked about making some changes to the trail down towards the lake. It's something we can discuss, but one, it would need an approval, because it's different than what we bid. It would need an agreement from the contractor saying we're willing to make that change order, potentially a reduction in taking that trail piece out, potentially an add back in if we looked at adding it into the basketball court. But we need that contractor's approval and question on the pricing. And we need the DNR's approval because it's not what we submitted to them in the grant application. They might say, when we looked at the park as a whole, part of it was that trail down to the lake, and they disagree with taking that out. They might say, if you want the $240,000 grant, this is what was approved. So it's conversations we can have beyond the recommendation tonight. But tonight essentially is acknowledge the plans, the design to the park, and the two budget amendments that carry forward from 21 to 22, as well as the increased amount, $172,000 on top, and awarding that contract to Minnesota Dirt Works. With that, I'll certainly take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Councilmember Vaughn.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dan, can you confirm in the packet that 172,000 extra is coming from park dedication fees, or a portion of it?
Yeah, good point, council member. It would be coming from park dedication fees.
which we as a council agreed, it's no longer Ward 1, 2, 3, 4. They're kind of, we're not using only Ward 1 park dedication fees for this park.
At this point, it would be using Ward 1. The thought is it would be using Ward 1 fees, but there's been discussion, which I expect will come through the budget process, to combine the 4 wards into a single pot. The single pot totals around $1 million right now.
I'll just share, Your Honor, I support this park 100%, but I think we got to, I support merging these park dedication fees from wards to one. This community, this park is the community park, not just Ward 1, not just Cowtown. And we went through a lot of changes, a lot of pain to get to where we're at today to make this park amazing for everybody. So I get what Mr. Likes is talking about. I don't want to jeopardize any DNR grant. We can still have those discussions. I'll have staff do that, but I support this going forward, and I think I wouldn't change a whole lot. We need to make a big push to get the community down this park because it is a beautiful setting. Lake Isabel is kind of a hidden gem that not many people know about, and we got to do our due diligence to say, this park got all redone. We just came out of a budget meeting and was talking about to redo a whole park, you can see just keeps escalating in costs. This might not be so acceptable as we go forward fixing parks. It's just too expensive. We can't keep up with the price rising costs. So I'm going to support this. I'll listen to my colleagues, but I support both of those amendments in the budget here. Thank you.
Councilmember Vaughn. Councilmember Lund?
Thank you, Your Honor. Just help me out with the map. Where's the trail that's being proposed to exist? Because I see the dock and I see other trails that don't go to the lake, so I'm just trying to understand that.
Yes,
Sure,
please.
come on up, Pete.
Help me out.
You can assist if you want.
The trail that.
Someone from the neighborhood.
Want to take out.
We can't see it there, though.
I'm sorry.
You can just use the mouse.
The trail that we wanted to take out was the one that went along the lake here. So we took that one out, right here.
There
We
you
t-
go.
we took
Thank
this,
you.
the trail that went down along the lake right here. We took that, we asked them to take that one out.
So it's already out.
Huh? It was already out.
Oh.
No, it was in the original conception, the plan that came like 4 months ago. And then when I met with Chris Jenkins after meeting with the people from Eastside Hastings, we said we want to take that out of there. There's no need to have 2 paths going through that park when you got a sidewalk there and a sidewalk there. You've got a path coming in there. So we want to take that. This is the one we told Chris Jenkins we want to take it out.
So
And we
Pete,
still
just-
get the ADA from off that sidewalk down to that warming house.
So Pete, for clarification, there's no trail there now,
There is no trail there now.
and they want to add it.
That, we want that, on the original drawing, they had it on there.
Okay.
We do not want that trail there,
Okay, just for clarification, thank you.
okay?
Does that
Thank you.
answer your question?
Not fully. I mean, we're getting
Len?
there. So the revised bid that we got does or does not include that work, having that path?
The revised bid should probably have not, that path should be off that bid,
Okay,
I think, I'm not sure. I was never told any numbers other than,
I believe the revised bid does include some trail going down towards the lake.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand
But-
cost,
but-
right?
but
Are we,
Pete, But removing that would need a change order from the contract and would also
and
need
then we'd have to
DNR approval.
resubmit.
I understand, and I understand that, and that's a layer of complexity, but just want to understand, are we also talking about an additional X $1,000s, or are we just horse trading money, this for that? So,
Chris said he had to resubmit the plan to the DNR, and he also had to plan, back to the state of Minnesota for ADA requirements. He said, but by taking that trail out of there and eliminating those benches that are on the original plan, there are 3 benches along there, like looking back into the park rather than at the lake, and you can't see the lake anyway because of the trees. So he said, take it out. And then we told him the sidewalk on the east side goes down. He said, we can put a concrete wash down a sidewalk from where the pole is there at the alley, take it down, they have the ADA accessibility into the warming house. And then we modified some of this along here. make it all hardscape, whatever concrete, so that this here, it all ties together off the path off Second Street and goes down, all the way down here towards the lake where you come into the lake, and then they're gonna change the parking lot over here to 80. They're gonna lower it so that they can walk up the path rather than up the steps. Okay? Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
one
you.
more question.
No,
Pete.
no, not for, no, you're good, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Pete.
You've done, you've done your job, you're good. So how does this work then? Do we, can we go back and resubmit and get a new bid? Do we approve, is it possible to approve
I
that
would-
as
I-
a condition as long as it doesn't increase the cost? What's the?
The recommendation is, don't mess with this trail. The recommendation is approve the plan, approve the bid by Minnesota Dirt Works, approve the budget carryover and the additional budget amendment, and then in the background, staff will inquire with the contractor and DNR if these changes can be made, and if so, we'll bring a change order to a future council meeting.
Is that right? Okay. All right. Thank you, Councilmember Lund. Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to, I'm sorry, Dan, it's not for you, it's for Pete. I would like to hear why it is that the residents wanted to have that path removed along what would have been like a, kind of like an overlook area. I thought it looked lovely on the plan, and I think the lake is gorgeous, and I thought it would have been a swell spot to sit and sip a beverage or something, and so I'm just perplexed.
As you look at the outline of the park, all the way around, it's not even a half a block big, okay? So in their inception, the sidewalk that runs along Second Street right there, then they said they wanted, you have to ADA approval if we put a path here. So what we said was, rather than have, you can't see into the lake because of the trees, and you can't cut the trees down because they're what's holding the park in there right now, in Lawley Road. And they had, on the drawing on this down here, they had the benches facing into the park and not looking at the lake. So the resident said, what good does it do to put a path over there? You're not gonna sit and you're gonna look north instead of south into the lake. Take those benches and put them along the sidewalk up here, where they're talking about that basketball court, because these benches are donated by the residents or whoever wants to make a donation to the city. So we'd take the 3 benches off down here along the lake and we'd put them up along the basketball lane there. That's, we would still, that way we still have hardscape for ADA. We eliminate that path down there because you got 1, 2, and you would have had 3 accesses into that park. You don't need that many. The park isn't that big.
Yeah, no, thank you, Pete. I didn't know that they were intending to have the benches actually face into the green space rather than looking out over the lake. I had made the assumption that they were gonna thin those trees a little bit and then have it as an overlook.
In talking with Chris again, we talked about that, and he said we can cut what's dead out of there, but the thing is you can't take anything live out of there because that's a sand hill there. And until you get up about a quarter of the way into the park, then when you get to the top of the hill, then you're in solid rock, but the whole slope down to the lake is all sand.
And they need the trees to keep the
You need the
shoreline.
vegetation to keep the trees there, or to keep the land, the park there, okay?
Right.
Okay, now I'm understanding, and that does make sense.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Any other? Sure, you make them up.
If their point is
Please state your name and your address.
Tanta Horning, 1319 East Third Street in Cowtown. So if the whole point of that walking path is to have a view of the lake, I was just down at the lake a week ago this past Sunday, and we have that dock. I mean, that's absolutely beautiful. If you walk down there, you can get a really nice view of the lake. And, you know, and then there's that thing, I don't know if it's supposed to be connected to the dock. It just is kind of floating out there. But, and then there is a little bit of a beach area, so you can, you know, stand on there and just kind of look. So, I don't know, that's what when we were looking at the plans, that path down there and being how short it was, a lot of people questioned, is it really a necessity? Being that they do have the dock where you can walk down that little board walkway and view the lake.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fulch, your light is still
Oh,
on? or
I'm
you're-
sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Pete, and I appreciate it.
No additional discussion, then I would accept a motion to approve the Lake Isabel redevelopment project, accept the bid from Minnesota Dirt Works, and approve, carry forward the budget amendment. Councilmember Lund, motion. Councilmember Fox with the second. Additional discussion.
Point of clarification then, I'm just confused as to what it is we're voting on, what plan.
This plan.
This plan without the trail and then.
The plan
Because it's currently not in the depiction. And so this is what we're voting on, is without.
No, we're voting on a plan with the trail.
Right.
The staff recommendation.
As another point of clarification, Your Honor.
Okay, that's really confusing. And so why is this rendering in the packet then? If, I guess I'm confused as to what it is that we're voting on completely, because I don't know. The staff, I'm sorry, yes, the state of Minnesota can be difficult to work with, but generally and it seems like a long time, but generally, they'll make modifications to a plan, and I don't think that after you understand better what it is that little trail would achieve, it seems to me that it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, when we saw the original depictions, I had thought that it was an overlook looking over the lake, and that there was gonna be a vantage point for people to actually see the lake. And if it's not, if the intention isn't for it to look over the lake so people can enjoy the lake, then that doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense to me. And so, it's a neighborhood park, and if that's what the consensus of the East Side Neighborhood Association is to remove that small area. I mean, after that, they've seen the depictions, and they've had, further conversation because they know that area the best. I think that it makes sense to listen to the residents and do what they're asking rather than to ignore it, so.
Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Councilmember Lund would like
Thank
to
you.
clarify his motion.
Yeah, maybe I'll provide a little clarification. Here's what I heard. I heard, move forward, don't mess with this right now so we can keep the ball rolling. In the background, staff is well understanding the situation. They will go investigate whether it's possible to remove the sidewalk, add the additional half court. They'll check that with the DNR and with the contractor. And if there's any change orders that need to be had, that'll come to us. But if I make a motion, which I didn't, to approve a full court, no sidewalk, without knowing if that's okay with the DNR and the contractor, then we might be in a tougher situation later. So my motion was to approve the plan, maybe not as drawn, but as bid, which included the sidewalk, half court at this point in time, and everything else is the same, with the understanding that staff would do that work, that legwork afterwards. So that's my motion.
And Councilmember Fox seconded that.
Your Honor, I just want to make sure that that's what Dan understands as well, because I support what you just said, Trevor, and that's what I would hope for. But what I had heard Dan say is that the staff recommendation was to keep the pathway in the plan and not ask for the change with the DNR. And so that's what I had heard as the staff recommendation. So I could have been incorrect, and so if Dan would please.
Clarify, I think Councilmember Lund was more articulate than I was.
Okay.
Staff's recommendation at this immediate point in time, 7/28 on Monday, July 18th, is approving the project as designed and as bid so we can get that under contract and keep the ball rolling. Separately, 5 minutes after the meeting, well, actually next week, when we're fully staffed, we will talk with the DNR and the contractor about the feasibility of removing that trail and/or adding to the basketball court. And if those are doable, would bring a change order to City Council at a future date.
Perfect. All right, thank you.
Okay. Okay. The motion is on the table with a second. All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion, state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Thank you, Dan. Let's see. And we also have tonight under administration, the comp and class study, which Dan will continue from the Diaz.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This has had a long discussion going back a year or a little over a year, noting that it's been a long time since we've done a formal compensation classification study. We discussed it at committee and at City Council, had budgetary approvals to hire a consultant, as well as budgetary approval for a sort of a placeholder amount towards implementation of the plan. We, early in the year, 2022, we hired Abdo Solutions. It was through a competitive bidding process. We hired Abdo Solutions as a consultant to work with on this, and have had a number of meetings with them at the staff level over the last few months to get to where we are tonight with a report. But essentially, it looks at a few things, wanting to make sure that our job descriptions are up to date, make sure that the job descriptions accurately reflect into, or the responsibilities of the jobs are reflected in their wage rates, wanting to make sure that our wages are consistent within the city, wanting to make sure that our wages are competitive in the broader market, looking at comparable cities in the area. Essentially, at the end of the day, Leah Davis will, in a minute here, present an overview of the plan. But the plan really is setting up, here's the data, here's the market, and some preliminary how our existing staffing fits into the market, but would recommend that we refer this to, or the City Council refer this to the Administration Committee of Council to discuss how do we implement this? Do we just take it as is? Are there areas that we make adjustments to? For example, if there are, as you'll see in a minute, 8 steps proposed. This position might start at step 1 and over time could progress 8 steps. Is that too many? Do we shorten it to, say, 6 steps and in doing so try to be more competitive on that starting wage? Is the potential, or a different example, is the potential total cost of implementation just too much to budget in a single year, and do we look at needing to phase it in over a couple of years and how to do that? So those are the types of things that would recommend that we refer to Administration Committee and bring it back in the next couple of meetings, I'd say by mid-August. But with that, I can take a question. Really like to hand it off to Leah Davis from Abdo Solutions to give the overview. Encourage ask questions of her, at least high-level questions of her, as well as of me, and the recommendation is refer it to Administration Committee, please.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Welcome, Leah.
Your Honor, council members, thank you for having me here tonight. And again, what I'm hoping to kind of do is give you a high-level overview of the work we've been doing with your leadership team at the the City of Hastings to go through the position classification and compensation study. So again, my name's Leah Davis. I'm a partner at Abdo. We are a regional CPA firm that at least over 30% of our clients are in the public sector. So my team works primarily on HR and payroll related consulting. And so we spend at least a third of our time focused specifically with government employers and cities like the City of Hastings, so counties, school districts as well. So what we'll kind of cover tonight, or what I'll go over with you, is just a general project overview. Sometimes with these projects, understanding the why is really important before we start digging into the what and some of the findings and recommendations. I'll give you a little bit of information, again, on myself and the team members that were involved in this project. I want to make sure we talk about what your underlying goals and some of the assumptions that were used in both the recommendations and the findings, and some of those things that will carry forward if you were to recommend this to your administrative committee, the things they'll be sort of considering and thinking about as they finalize the plan. We're going to talk a little bit about what the analysis process and methodology is. The reality is that anything related to compensation can be a little heartburn causing for a lot of different stakeholders, right? And so understanding, or at least getting a little bit of background on how the data was pulled together and analyzed, and what the numbers mean and what they don't mean, can be kind of important as we go that way. And then we'll just give you sort of a highlight of the findings and the compensation plan that's being proposed. And then there'll be some time for questions if you have any for me. All right. As we look at the compensation project overview, this is a lot of information, but you'll get it and you can kind of dig in. But I think Dan did a really good job of kind of talking high level about all of the parts that are encompassed in a classification and compensation study. The city started with a full-blown comprehensive update to job descriptions. That was a really important component of the study, is that we had a really accurate depiction of each position and the related duties, responsibilities, and requirements for each of those positions, because I'll kind of show you, as you get into the study, those really are the foundation for a well-done classification and compensation study. So that was a huge undertaking, and we supported the city with that, but that was done primarily by city leadership, and they really invested a lot of time and energy into that. We did perform a high-level ADA and FLSA exempt, non-exempt classification review, just to make sure from a compliance perspective that all of those updated descriptions were sort of consistent and in line with regulatory guidance. The next piece then was to take all of those job descriptions and apply a scoring methodology. So in every city, every position must be assigned a numeric score. And sort of the way you do the math is a little different depending on which provider you use and which methodology you use. So our team uses the HAY methodology. It's a calculation developed by the state of Minnesota. We've been using it for almost 15 years. And as with any scoring methodology, it's really intended to place a numeric value on sort of the knowledge, skills, experience, the overall impact that individual position has on the organization, the level of independence they have, the complexity of problems that position's required to solve, as well as taking into consideration budgetary impact. So when an individual in that role is tasked with making a decision, what is the scope of impact, both from a budgetary and overall organizational perspective. And so what ends up happening then is you have all of the positions, and they sort of rank themselves in hierarchical, from lowest to highest in terms of scoring. And then all of those scores really make sense within the context of your own organization. So I always say it's really important to note that your police chief may have a very different score from Northfield's police chief, and that's okay. Because as long as that score makes sense within your organization, there's not an apples to apples comparison from one city to the next city. They may do the math differently as well too, right? Depending on the different methodologies used. So we were really involved in that. We conducted that scoring independently. We brought that back to the leadership team just to get feedback, right? So the independent perspective from our team is very, very important throughout the study, including with the scoring. But we did have discussions with city leadership about, did we miss anything? Does something seem off? So they were really involved in that process to make sure we got that right from the beginning. Once we finished the scoring, then we go out to the market. So the city of Hastings actually has a very specific ordinance that states who you compare yourselves to when it comes to compensation. And so we relied heavily on that. It's in the report. I don't have the exact language. Kelly sent that over. But so it's specific in terms, we're looking at comparables related to proximity to the metro, population, organizations that have similar utilities and other functions within the city. And so we really are got sort of buy-in based on the city ordinance and leadership in that regard on who are our comparables. And then we went out and conducted a full compensation analysis. So the sources we used for the analysis included the League of Minnesota Cities 2022 salary survey, as well as some we have a tool that we subscribe to called the Economic Research Institute database. And so there were a couple positions where we utilized data from that database for positions that we weren't able to find quite enough comparables for from the league. We also did a direct solicited survey for some cities that you'd identified as important comparables, but that had not participated in the league study. And there were a couple county data points that we'll show you that we used for a couple different public works positions that we wanted to get better comparables for. We pull all that information together, so you have your scores, you have your compensation data, and using that and some of the underlying sort of compensation philosophy within the city, we pull together a proposed step and grade table that helps pull all of your positions that currently have fairly independent ranges by position and pull them into a unified step and grade plan. Another important component of this study is to make sure that whatever plan you adopt moving forward, that it puts you in a good position from a Minnesota pay equity compliance perspective. So that's an every 3-year reporting requirement with the state of Minnesota. It takes into consideration both the scores assigned to each position as well as the minimum and maximum pay. And what it's really seeking to do is ensure that that predominantly male dominated positions are being paid, or female positions are being paid equitably to male positions if scores are similar, if that makes any sense. So, and having a more structured step and grade table assists with that as you move forward, rather than having specific positions have specific ranges, sort of independent of one another. All right. So again, my name's Leah Davis, and Michael Mooney, who's a senior associate on our team, worked with me as well on this project. I kind of covered a little of this. So it's just some high-level things that, as we went into the study, we kept in mind. Dan talked a little bit about why is it necessary to do a study. Right now, particularly, you're seeking to attract and retain talent, and it is uniquely difficult right now. So as we go into these studies, it's just important that we recognize that for continuity within the city and to make sure you can stay competitive in the labor market, it's important that you understand where the market is. The second is that you've historically aimed to place yourself competitively with the market. And so again, knowing where the market is gives you then the flexibility to say, now that we know where that point is, where is the average, where would we like to place ourselves relative to that point. That structure, that more formalized structure, is important, both for internal sort of fairness, but also from a compliance perspective with Minnesota pay equity. And that also, and we talked a little bit about this, but at our initial meeting with department leadership, just that it was very, very important that all of the contributions of every individual within the organization was recognized, and making sure that those were being considered and factored into both the scoring and the compensation model. Really critical to understand as well, while we included all of your positions that are represented by the 5 unions within the city, those compensation, all of that compensation needs to be negotiated separately. So those positions have been scored, the job descriptions have been updated, the market data has been compiled, but any recommendations that our team pulled together related to a step and grade table, a proposed compensation model, those union represented positions are not included because they need to be negotiated independently. So keeping that in mind. Any questions so far? All right. Oh, here we go. Process and methodology. So when we talk about the comparables that we used, again, League of Minnesota Cities, and again, that second bullet point there has your verbatim, your existing resolution that we made sure to align the comparables with. As we went out to match jobs, so we identified those comparable cities, but we also then take the time to match the jobs to make sure those are a good fit. And so using those newly developed job descriptions and the data we have available from the survey resources, matching those up as best we could. And when we're talking about the market data, we're talking about an average at the minimum pay and an average at the maximum pay. So we're not just saying this is the average pay for a position, we're looking at that average range for each position. And comparing it to your current pay range for each position. Here's a list of the comparable municipalities that we had at least one data point from. So important to note, Mower County, for example, we only have one data point that we used from Mower County. I believe it was related to a heavy equipment operator because we struggled to find that specific position in some different cities. So most of these organizations, we used multiple comparable data points, but there are a few. South Metro Fire Department, for example, we were looking specifically at your firefighter paramedic positions. So we didn't use other positions for those. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, so key findings, where did we land? Your minimum on average, so minimum pay on average for all positions was just slightly below the market minimum. At 0.64% below the market. Really important to note though, and I have this both for your minimum and maximum, it is just an average. So individual positions can vary widely, and there are different reasons why that might be, but on average, minimum starting pay across the organization was relatively close to market. Current pay maximums, on average, were slightly lower at about 5.42% below the market average maximum pay for all positions. And again, that's an average of all the positions. Important to note, when there's a variation, one of the things that can be sort of a reflex when we look at market data is to assume that it's telling us we need to do something. And really, when you're looking at the data, there could be legitimate reasons for variations. Sometimes the jobs aren't a good match, and maybe we just don't know. We don't get a job description from every other organization. We get a one-sentence sort of description of the position and a title. So you do your best to match, but in some organizations, you may have a really unique position with different duties and responsibilities, and it may differ from the market in pay for one reason or another, and that may be correct, as long as you've done that sort of intentionally and you understand why it varies, right? The new community service officer and senior building permit technicians were scored. Job descriptions have been finalized and they're included in the study. So those positions are not filled, but you now have the market data to know where you could place them when you go out to do that. And then it's also important to note that all the data that we used in the study was 2022 data. And so as you move into 2023, you'll want to make sure that you're considering a COLA, because that market will move on you. The table we've proposed today would be a 2022 table, and so be considering COLAs just as you would any other normal year as you roll that table forward. All right. So this is just a visual. We won't get into this, but this is sort of what that step and grade table looks like from a sort of mechanics perspective. It's again 8 steps from the start step to the top step. There are 20 grade levels. Those grade levels are organized and grouped by point value. So you can see on the far left, each position has been assigned a point value in that scoring exercise. And so per position, you can align the point with the respective grade the point value of the position with the respective grade, and then you can see kind of where each position would align. It's a 3.25% increase from step to step, and I have to confirm here, 7.85% increase from grade to grade. So if an individual was on step 1, grade 5, and they moved to step 1, grade 6, that's a 7.85% increase from grade to grade. Range within grade is just over 21% from the start step to the top step. Okay. Here's what everyone wants to know. So what if approved, as is? Now again, you're not seeking approval tonight. The recommendation, and we'll get into this, is to take this information and some of the recommendations, move it to the administrative committee, and let them work out some of the, sort of fine-tune some of the study. If adopted, implementation, and again, we're just throwing out scenarios. They'll have a lot of flexibility to make some decisions around this, but just to give you a general estimate of cost, if you were to adopt as of July 1, 2022, so a retroactive adoption, get everyone onto that table. There's sort of the adjustment of we move into the house, right? Consider it a new structure. Kelly and I were talking about this today. If you buy a house, first you have to move in, and then everyone has to pick a room. Okay, so there's kind of two phases of adopting a plan like this. So the first is to get everyone on the table. They move to the step closest to their current rate of pay within their respective assigned grade. And then there's a bit of a market position adjustment that can happen. So maybe someone is very senior and tenured, they're at their top step today, but if they move on to the table, it places them somewhere in the mid-range of the table. There may be some market position adjustments where that person should be more towards the top of the range just due to seniority and experience. And so all of that taken into consideration, this would be an approximate cost. Pretty darn close though, we looked at it individual by individual for 2022. Just to give you a ballpark. Next steps, again, I'll take some questions, but really what we're talking about tonight is recommending that council sort of just acknowledge receipt of the report, which you'll receive shortly after this meeting. Intentionally, I like to go through the presentation before you get the report in your hands because the data can mean something very different if we haven't had a chance to talk about it a little bit. And the goal would be for the administrative committee to come back with a final recommendation that you can consider and vote on by some mid-August. All right. There's a few, some recommendations for things for the administrative committee to consider. Dan kind of talked about those, so I'll take questions if anyone has any.
Thank you, Leah.
Yeah.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Thank you, Your Honor, and I'm glad it's going to committee because I think there's going to be a few details to work out, but I went through this myself, and implementing is a different story than putting it in front of us because I think that work's going to come on staff's part, and one of the questions I'll have for the committee to ask that question is, do they have the bandwidth to put everybody in a house at one time? Because that's a whole lot of work on our staff to get that implemented. And then my next part is, did anybody go down? That will be another question, and if so, how do we implement that? I'd be curious, because that happened at my community. It froze a few people, and that doesn't go very well when they're stuck. But my question to you is, should the committee be looking at our ordinance? Did that handcuff you? Do you think as a company that we had this, are we unique having an ordinance?
Candidly, it was actually very refreshing that you knew who you compared yourself to. There's a lot of organizations that it's sort of like, well, today we're going to compare ourselves to this group, and next month we're going to compare ourselves to this group, or we compare ourselves from a budget perspective to this city, but when we talk about comp, we want to use this city. So I would actually say no. I think it provided some clarity, but we didn't go in limiting ourselves to those organizations either. We just knew that those were sort of our primary focus and that it was a priority that we sought out as much information from those locations as possible, but that if we needed more data, we were working together to find reasonable comparables to make sure we got it.
Because I don't know, was the ordinance only for salaries, or was it for
I can pull it up here.
expenses and everything else that go with it?
Counselor, can I answer that question?
Your Honor, members of the council, this is actually in resolution form, so if you chose to change it, it wouldn't be that difficult. It's not an ordinance.
Got it. And I just don't know if we use it for all projects, everything we compare it to, or is it just for salaries that we could use that ordinance, so.
Yeah, it says the City of Hastings employee compensation schedule will be based upon a comparison of cities with populations from 15 to 35,000 in the 7-county metro region, and specifically include the cities of Cannon Falls, Cottage Grove, Northfield, and Red Wing.
And the last question I have for you is, I think times have changed, and I noticed that we have one chart, and is that for union? How about part-timers? That was not discussed, if I remember right, at this one. You guys did not look at our part-time staff, but how about salary versus hourly? That'll be another question I'll ask. Is the salary mentality still there, or is it gone? And because I have some salary employees that work for me, but still operate as kind of an hourly. And I think that's important when we look into a chart, because what's the expectation of a salary employee to work up and above an average, or is it just, should they all be hourly employees? So I'm not on a committee, so I get to pass it off to the next crew to ask those questions, but thank you for putting this all together.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vaughn. Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, within the report, and I don't sit on the administrative committee, and so I am really interested in this conversation because I haven't been a part of the details to date because of that. But in regards to the public safety related job descriptions and such for the fire department and the police department, throughout the state, we're kind of at a crisis when it comes to being able to find enough individuals who are fully qualified to be able to take those positions, and it's become extremely competitive. And so I'm very interested to hear more detail about those particular positions and how it is that we're going to address them, because, I mean, it no longer seems reasonable just to be shooting for average pay at the 50th percentile to be retaining those employees, because we do not want to see them moving elsewhere to move up. We need to be really strategic about trying to keep them here within the city, and so I'm really concerned about that, and I'd love to hear what it is that you found specifically into those professions. Thanks.
Yes, definitely. So you are 100% accurate. Those have always been, competitive positions, but I would say within the last couple of years, they've really moved away from the market differently than some of the other some of the other positions within the city. So in your situation, you have market data for each of those positions, and that's where you as an organization can decide whether it's for the whole organization, for certain sort of hot skill. It's kind of a phrase in compensation circles right now, but any of those sort of high demand positions or hard to find positions, you have the flexibility now that you know where the market is at to place yourself intentionally where you think you need to be. Police, fire, those are all going to be negotiated independently as you go into union negotiations, and so you can place different, and again, I'm not saying I recommend this necessarily, those are the things your administrative committee will need to talk through, but you'll be able to negotiate all of those groups independently, and now that you know where the market is at, you can decide, do we need to be X in the upper quartile for starting pay and top-end pay in any of those areas? Do we need to be there for the rest of the organization? So those are all things you'll need to talk through, but you're 100% right. I'm seeing organizations who have police who are not represented by union, so they would actually be able to be placed within the sort of primary step and grade table, and they're having to pull them out and range them separately because they cannot get compensation to align with where they'd be placed in a grade appropriately. They've sort of kicked themselves off the table. So.
Continue.
You are seeing other communities that are pulling out those particular, I'm so sorry. So you are seeing other communities that are looking at those professions separately and having different pay structures for them? Am I understanding that correctly then?
Well,
or-
you currently have a different pay structure because it's negotiated by their collective bargaining agreement, completely separate from the rest of the organization anyway. So you've always had a different pay structure for them. But yes, I'm even seeing organizations that aren't forced to negotiate independently that are having to pull those out. Again, though, it is really important that you're paying attention to pay equity compliance as you go into those things too. So Kelly and I have had conversations about, as you go into negotiations, how are you going to do ongoing testing within the Minnesota pay equity system to make sure that we don't sort of, your police and fire are predominantly male positions. And if they're scored similarly to predominantly female positions and we're paying them significantly more than that similarly pointed female position, we need to be doing testing. A little of that is allowed, but those are surprises you're not going to want when you go into testing in 2023 again. So it's a delicate balance that you have to strike between how much you can pull them out and keeping the rest of the organization compliant.
Okay.
Thank you, Council. Yep, continue.
And I guess I have a question for Dan. As we're moving forward, what are the plans for listening to those staff, to get feedback? Because I know that there's, obviously the various unions and they have their representation. And then, I'm also concerned about those employees that don't fall under a union, the professionals that, like the management team or others who are, exempt that aren't in a union. How is it that you're going to solicit, feedback as we're moving forward so that everyone's feeling fully informed and listened to?
I think there's a little bit two different pieces there about being informed and being listened to. It's related, but
Yep.
two different pieces. One, although over the past 5 months or so that this has gone on, there's certainly been times that it's been quiet. We're waiting on survey data or something like that. But at particular milestones throughout the process on the front end, and even a newsletter that went out earlier today, we have given information and updates to all employees about where this is at, what's going on, how this would get used. So that giving information piece has certainly been there. And I hope that on the front end just answers a lot of their questions. I'm sure it doesn't answer all of them, but I hope that being upfront has been. In terms of listening to them, it's tough to discuss that in terms of strictly hypotheticals, but if somebody were to say that they felt that their job description, their pointing, or the pointing with their job description was not accurate, would want to know what or why that is, and potentially if hey, the pointing really seemed to miss something, didn't understand the job description, we would want to be able to go back and review that. But really, that feedback is something we should have had, and I think did have back in March, when we gave them, here's the job descriptions, what updates need to be made to the job description, are they current with what you're doing? Department heads, are we getting an accurate reflection from your staff and what you're expecting, their responsibilities, the complexity, the problem solving, the prerequisite of the position, are these accurate? So they, indirectly or directly actually, were part of designing the process on the front end. It's possible that something missed, but I hope that it's already reflecting their piece. A different piece of the hypotheticals of what we might hear from them and respond to, if it's simply a matter of I want a bigger raise, or I didn't get the same raise as somebody else. Well, we're looking at positions, not really looking at individuals, so that, I guess the data behind that grid that Leah put up there is based off of, here's the survey, the market data that we got from other communities similar to Hastings. And yeah, it might be something that somebody would want a larger raise than what the data or what the market reflects, but this is what we're seeing in the market for the specific responsibilities of this position. And what we're seeing with a different position might be different in the market, but really this is what the data is showing us. We're looking at positions, not individuals. Would want to hear somebody out and try to understand where they're coming from, but it isn't going to change the data or the market. So
Sure.
it's tough on the hypothetical on how would we respond to them, because any question that might come up could vary, but we would certainly want to understand where they're coming from and see if there's something that is maybe being misunderstood in the report, or if potentially if there was something wrong. We did not recognize oversight position requires a particular license, and somehow that didn't get carried forward into the pointing system. Correct an error like that, but really it's looking at the positions, not an individual.
I would just ask that you have consideration for doing listening sessions with the employees, including those who are non-union, and also having an appeal process once you get to the point where you're actually telling each individual person, okay, well, this is how it affects you, particularly as Councilmember Vaughn had mentioned, for folks who may have the situation that arises where the point system, says that they are being overly paid and that they get frozen, because that's not a particularly good situation for anyone to be in. And so just to know, I just think that the more that we can do to communicate and make it a two-way, so that everyone feels more comfortable that they're being listened to. The devil is in the detail, and I think that once, units begin to have the opportunity to look more specifically as to how it is that applies to them and their positions, that there may be cause for, further conversation. And so I don't sit on the administrative committee, and so I just wanted to say that right now, and I would hope that there'd be discussion about pulling out, as you had said, those hot, what do you call it? Hot items?
Hot skills.
Hot
It's
skills.
kind of a weird phrase.
Yeah,
but
no,
yes,
but it
hot
makes
skills.
sense. Like electricians, trade positions are really hot and also, and so it's not just public safety individuals, public works directors. things of that nature.
I will just add one comment too, that from the very beginning of the study, leadership made it extremely clear that department heads needed to be very, very involved in the process, because they are the people that, they're going to be the first person that someone comes and has a question or a concern. And so we wanted to make sure that they felt very equipped and that they really understood and felt comfortable with both the process, the methodology, what the numbers mean, what they don't mean, where we can, where you can be flexible and where you are sort of boxed in by compliance types of things. So they've been great and been involved throughout the study. So I think across all departments, you have department heads who are well educated in the study and what it means, and with a little help will be good advocates for their employees.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Fulch. Thank you, Leah. Any other discussion, council? Then I'd look, Dan?
Just a point of clarification. It wasn't a question. I heard a comment earlier about part-time employees. Part-time regular employees were included in the study. It was the seasonal positions as well as the paid-on-call positions that were not. But general part-time employees were included in the study.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I'd accept a motion to refer the compensation study to the administrative committee. Councilmembers Lund, Liefeld, and Fox. with a deadline for recommendation back to the city council is August 15th. Councilmember Fulch and Councilmember Vaughn is a second. Additional new discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion, state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Thank you all. Thank you, Leah. Tonight, we have a strategic initiatives quarterly report, and council, there is no action on this. It's just necessarily discussion and feedback, and Dan, you may continue.
Yeah, and no action, and not even necessarily a whole lot to present outside what's in the memo and associated report. When the city council adopted this back September of last year, one of the emphases was we want to make sure this is active and regularly reported, not a plan that just sits on the shelf, so to speak. So we have reported back quarterly. That's what this is. The two differences tonight are prior quarterly reports, we've simply put in the consent agenda. Here it is, and could just as easily do that tonight, but wanted to make sure that it was relatively easy for council to ask questions or make comments if you wished. The other piece that's a little bit different is I view the strategic initiatives as having three parts to it, what you all adopted back last September. One is the 8 strategic initiatives themselves, and those have been the emphasis of the quarterly report, saying here's the progress, the achievements on each of these over the past 3 months. Another section of the initial strategic adoption we called the future topics, and affectionately we've nicknamed it the parking lot. These are things that are great ideas. They aren't quite the priority in terms of time or resources or budget right now, but we don't want to forget about them. We want to keep track of them. And over the time, there's even been some progress on parking lot items. So we've wanted to report those as they've come forward. It's probably also feeding grounds for future topics as we update the strategic initiatives later this fall or early in the coming year. The third part that was in what was actually adopted back last September, but we've not reported, but I included a piece here tonight, is recognizing that there are many other, call them projects, things that are significant in terms of staff time, budget. They're a bit beyond the day-to-day operations. There's a lot going on, and wanted to emphasize in that original report that these are still occurring, these are still priorities. We're not limited to just the 8 initiatives. So there was a list of, I don't know what it is, 30, 40 other projects that we expected to be going on in the coming year. We've not reported those previously. So wanted to, not as much detail as the other initiatives, but wanted to give a quick recognition to there are other activities across all our departments that we have seen progress. Want to note those because they take staff time and budget. It also wanted to make sure we note where there's achievement. With that, I can certainly take any questions or listen to other feedback that council might have, but as the mayor indicated, it's not an action item tonight. It's our standard quarterly report. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Any discussion, council? If not, okay, we will continue and move on to number 3 under administration, which is a second reading and adopt an ordinance for alcoholic beverages. And welcome Kelly Murtar, our Assistant City Administrator.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members, I'm back before you reviewing the second reading of the amendment to City Code regarding alcoholic beverages. And this, as you may remember, is a reflection of the omnibus liquor bill that was approved earlier this year. And just a couple of highlights or notes that were in this bill that impacted us. This is allow small brewers to have additional off-sale options. It allows a municipality to issue on-sale and on-sale malt liquor licenses for baseball teams competing within the Minnesota Baseball Association. And it also allows extended hours for those who may want to celebrate the men's and women's World Cup soccer tournaments. So there are some modest changes. There's one adjustment to the fee. It's a new fee for those who do want to engage in the extended hours for soccer. But other than that, all existing fees cover any changes that we have in place. So with that, at this point, I would certainly welcome any questions.
Thank you, Kelly. Any discussion, council? And Councilmember Fox.
As I mentioned at our last meeting, I will be abstaining for the reason that this is obviously in conflict with my business. But I can help answer any questions if that's appropriate, so.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fox. Okay, council, I would accept a motion to approve the second reading and adoption of an ordinance for the City of Hastings, Minnesota, amending various provisions of Hastings City Code Chapter 111, 94.05, and Chapter 34 regarding alcoholic beverages. Councilmember Vaughn, Councilmember Fulch. Additional discussion, council? All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Thank you, Kelly. Council members, are there any announcements that you'd like to make? Councilmember Fulch.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to give a quick update. Something that I've been doing is I am currently chairing the League of Minnesota Cities Legislative Policy Group on improving service delivery. We had our first meeting on July 11th, and for those of you who don't know, the City of Hastings is a member of the League of Minnesota Cities, and the League of Minnesota Cities works with I think it's all of the cities, over almost 850 cities throughout the state as members, and they work collaboratively across, there's 4 different policy groups that meet to discuss various aspects of legislation, and so I'm on improving service delivery, and it was a really great conversation, and I just wanted to let you know that one of the things that kind of snuck through at the end of the last legislative session was a bill that allowed some cannabis to be allowed, and so we're seeing the sale of gummies, and something that the League of Minnesota Cities is going to be working on is they're bringing together a task force that's going to discuss what are the implications at the local level and how it is that we could be regulating that a little bit better, and so there'll be more to come on that for us to digest in the months to come. The other issues that came up, ambulance service costs. We were just having this conversation about how that's impacting our own fire department, and so that was echoed throughout many other communities. Workforce housing and broadband access, employee recruitment and retention, and tax issues including the shifting in property tax trends, local government aid, possible formula changes that will be coming, in truth in taxation. And so our next meeting is second week of August, and so we're going to have speakers that are going to talk more about these particular issues, and there'll be suggestions for changing the League of Minnesota Cities policy positions on those. And so if our council has any topics that we're interested in, that we would like to have suggestions for, or if we would like to participate in any of the subtask forces that are going to be created, now is the time in the next month to be coming up with those considerations to be moved forward.
Okay, thank
So
you,
thanks.
Councilmember Fulch. Okay, I have a few other announcements. Tomorrow, July 19th, Drawn to the River is a live art presentation featuring Hastings history. Summer rec programs at Levy Park, Wednesday, July 20th. Story time in the park is Animals, recommended for ages 10 and under, a partnership with Pleasant Hill Library. Thursday, July 21st, Music in the Park with Nick Fox and the Metronomes, supported by Ruth and George Doffing Charitable Fund. Tuesday, July 26th, Performance in the Park with Wild Goose Chase Cloggers, sponsored by Smead Manufacturing Company. Thursday, July 28th, Music in the Park with Bok Choy, supported by Ruth and George Doffing Charitable Fund. The Parks and Recreation and Police Departments are partnering with Hastings Prescott Area Arts Council to serve up fun for tweens and teens. This month, the Rec, Art, and Police event will be Wednesday, July 27th at Sunny Acres Park, sponsored by SC Toys and Country Financial. Makers Alleyway Market returns Thursday, July 21st and July 28th. Support area makers and artisans. National Night Out is an annual community building event. Please join us on Tuesday, August 2nd at Lyons Park or in local neighborhood gatherings. Meetings coming forward are Tuesday, July 19th, Heritage Preservation Commission. Wednesday, July 20th, Public Arts Task Force. Thursday, July 21st at 6:30 p.m., Public Safety Advisory Commission. Monday, July 25th, Planning Commission at 7 p.m. Monday, August 1st, City Council meeting at 7 p.m. I'd also just like to give a shout out of thanks to the Hastings Area Chamber of Commerce, their Rivertown Day Committee, and their board for putting on an exceptional community event this past weekend. I think most of us were there and we enjoyed ourselves, and many people from out of our community too. So thank you to the Chamber of Commerce for that leadership. And council, I would accept a motion to approve to adjourn. Councilmember Brox, Councilmember Fulch. No discussion. All those in favor of the motion state by saying aye. Aye. Opposed to that motion state by saying nay. And that motion prevails. Thank you all.